Hello, Incredible Moms. This is Crystal Evaristo with the Incredible Moms podcast, where we discuss getting pregnant, being pregnant, having babies, being a mom, and so much more. We hope you enjoy the show. I'm here with Amy today. She's going to tell us about her pregnancy with her son and her struggles with postpartum depression afterwards. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
We can kind of jump right into it. So my husband and I knew that we wanted to start a family. A few years after we got married, we had a thing called a cradle list. So it was all the things we wanted to do before we had kids. Included like paying off debts and traveling, and the big item on it was going to Alaska on a cruise. So we did all of that, and then we got to keep on adding to the list because we had infertility issues. We ended up trying for our son for 18 months and then ended up using a fertility clinic who did ovulation induction to help us conceive our son.
Can you explain ovulation induction a little bit?
So we did letrozole. So we really just had to, it was more monitoring my cycle and blood work to check all of my levels. And then I would take these pills for, I think it was maybe 6 or 7 days during my cycle that would hyperstimulate my ovaries. So the first round I had 5 follicles on one side, one ovary, and like 8 on the other ovary. They would do an ultrasound, confirm that I had follicles, and then I would go home, take tests to see if my LH was surging to show that I was hopefully getting ready to ovulate. And then we had time intercourse with that. The first round, no nice. I didn't get pregnant off that round. Went in for our second round. Same kind of procedure, take the medicine, do all the blood work, check your levels, come in, get the ultrasound. That ultrasound, one ovary didn't have any follicles on it, and the other one only had 3 on it. So it was pretty depressing. Ultrasound, I was like, we had so many the last time. There's no way it's going to work this time. And then it worked. I was waiting for my period to come, and it wasn't coming, and came home from a workout, and my husband was like, you should take a pregnancy test. I was like, no, I'm sick of taking tests. I'm sick of seeing them negative. I'm not doing it. And he was like, come on, do it. So I took the test and just threw it on the bathroom counter, whatever. There's no point in looking at it. It's going to be negative. And kind of turned around and saw in the corner of my eye that there was a second line on it, and I yelled for him. He came into the bathroom, and we were just screaming and hollering and praying and thanking God that, we finally got pregnant. And then, he was like, we got to go get a digital. We got to make sure it's real. We got to get the high dollar test, because if you've ever done or suffered with infertility, you get the cheap test off Amazon or the dollar store test because you're taking
the box of 25 and you pee on it all month long.
Yeah, you're taking entirely too many tests and ovulation tests. So you just have like a stockpile of tests. We were pregnant. We got to go into the fertility clinic and have very early ultrasounds, which was really cool. So we got to hear the heartbeat and have a recording of the heartbeat the first time we heard it.
Oh, that's nice.
It was just really, really nice starting at the fertility clinic. It felt like we had a lot of extra care.
Yeah.
And then we moved to a regular doctor. We graduated to a regular doctor around 8 weeks. And it was fairly uneventful from there. I had some issues with, high blood pressure, but never pre-eclampsia.
Did it start like after 20 weeks?
Yeah.
Before, okay.
After 20 weeks, my blood pressure started getting a little worse. And then, I was really just like, it's just stress. It's just stress. It's one of the, we were trying for so long and everyone in the family is so excited and, it's just a lot of stress. And I'm
Pressure.
and I'm a complete control freak. So, I was like, it's just stress. It's no. And so I was 37 weeks one day at my appointment and they said, we're going to send you to the hospital for more testing because
preeclampsia.
You may have preeclampsia. Well, we just had bought tickets to Game 4 of the Hurricanes in the Stanley Cup, like playoffs. Like, are you serious? And so drive over to the hospital, sell our tickets in the hospital parking lot. They take me into the hospital, have me there for an hour, and send me home.
Oh my God.
So I'm watching the game on TV.
Oh my God. I would be so mad.
Yeah. So we're watching the game on TV but it was really good because I hadn't packed a bag and it kind of kicked me into gear because I was like, all right, I need to make my plan this weekend. I'm getting everything done, all of my notes done at work. So, they can run without me for a little while. And then, I'm going and I'm buying this cute robe and I'm getting everything ready. And, we put the car seat in the car and all of that. We're getting ready because, in a few weeks, we're going to have a baby. So finally, the game's over. We go to bed a little after midnight. And I wake up at 6:30 that next morning with cramps.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh man, like that's so weird. Like this feels like I'm getting ready to start my period. I move around in bed and they're still coming. I tell my husband, I'm like, babe, wake up. I was like, I'm having these awful cramps. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, these cramps, they just keep coming. They won't go away. He's like, well, go use the bathroom. I'm like, I don't have to use the bathroom.
Typical guy.
So then he's like, well, have you timed them? And I'm, what do you mean have I timed them? They're cramps. And he's like, I'm not so sure about that. So I'm like, whatever. I've got to go pee. So I get up and go pee. And I wipe and there's my mucus plug. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go sit back in bed. And he's like, well, let's start timing them. Okay, whatever. Let's time these cramps. And they're 5 minutes apart. And they keep coming. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm in labor, like it's going to be a long, long day, like really long day. Let's get up, mosey around, eat some breakfast, figure out if these are going to keep going or not. So he made me breakfast and then we're sitting there and eating and just bouncing on my ball, just eating my eggs. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to go into work if I'm feeling like this. Maybe we should just stay home today. And so I called my boss and I was like, I think I'm having contractions. And I was like, I think I'm going to go to the doctor and figure out what's going on. And he was like, okay, well, we'll see you at the office later. And a really big one hit. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
While you're on the phone.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, that one kind of took my breath away. Stopped talking for a minute. And then I was like, yeah, I'm not today.
It's like your baby was telling you, no, Mom, no, don't do it.
So then I was like, well, this is my first kid. I'm going to go take a shower. And so go get in the shower. And by this point, I am in the shower and these contractions start bringing me to my knees. And my husband is like, get out. It is time to go. And I'm like, well, my hair's soaking wet. I don't have any makeup on. And I'm like, but then they keep coming and they are fast. I mean, they're like 3 minutes apart. And this time, they are so fast. So call my doctor and I'm like, hey, I'm having contractions. They're like, I need to go to the hospital. And they're like, well, come in. We want to make sure you're really in labor. Oh, well, I'm pretty sure I'm really in labor, guys. But okay, whatever. I'll come in.
To the doctor's office, not the hospital.
So the doctor's office is right across the street from the hospital.
Oh, okay.
So I get to the doctor's office and Y'all, traffic on 40 driving in from Johnston County to Wayne County by Rex around 8:30 on a Friday morning.
While hurting.
Well, I don't know what the truck driver saw. I just know I had one foot up on the dash and I was holding on to what they call the OSHA handle, thinking, oh my God, you have got to get me to the doctor. Finally, so we get to the doctor. I don't know what took forever. I think that was the longest ride I've ever had on 40. Finally get to the doctor's office and I'm walking into the office and have a contraction in the middle of the parking lot that brought me to my knees in the middle of this parking lot. Ride that one out on my knees in the parking lot, get back up.
You're like crawling into the doctor's office.
Walk into the doctor, pretty much. Walk into the doctor's office. And I mean, they are just coming back to back at this point. I get there, I'm in the elevator and I'm like, oh my gosh, another contraction's go up. And I mean, get there and they see me and they're like, oh, take her, get a wheelchair and take her right back. I'm like, I told you guys, I was really in labor. So they take me back. They check me. This sweet angel from the Lord is fanning me with this fan, and it is the greatest thing in the world. They check me, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're 5 centimeters.
Oh, no.
I'm like, okay. They're like, so, yeah, go ahead and head on over to Rex. I'm like, okay.
Quickly.
Yeah. So we get in the car. We head over to Rex. I'm sitting there, and another contraction. Apparently, my contraction position is hands and knees. So I'm
for comfort.
Yep, I'm on my knees holding on to the wheelchair while I'm waiting for someone to please come get me, put me in a place to have this baby. And this other sweet couple, they're getting induced, and she's just comfortably walking around looking at me like I'm a deranged maniac.
Take her first, please.
It turns out they had about 22 babies born that day. So I still remember the nurse manager was the one who ended up taking me back to my delivery room because they were so busy.
You're like, you got a bed?
Yeah, so got a bed. I mean, at this point, I got there at like 10:15 and it was kind of non-eventful. I went back and forth on, do I want an epidural? Do I not? I planned to go without an epidural. And so with nitrous oxide, my husband and my nurse Rashawn, that's what happened.
Did you like the nitrous oxide?
I did. It was kind of weird. But I liked it until I finally dilated. I mean, it was very quick, but, finally got to 10 centimeters. And my doctor was like, yeah, you can't use that to push.
What?
Yeah. Oh. So I went from a 5 at the doctor's office, got in my room at the hospital, was a 7.
Wow.
Went from a 7 to a 10 in pretty much another hour.
So you weren't even really, you were there maybe a couple hours and you were already pushing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got to the hospital around 10 something and my son was born at 12:12.
Wow.
So from start to finish, about 6 hours.
I bet that's the last time your doctor's office makes a big deal. You know what I mean? Like says, oh, well, she's a first time mom. Let's just get her in here.
Yeah. So start to finish. But yeah, so he told me I couldn't use the nitrous oxide pushing. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Why? Wait, so it is time to push. I have no other medication option now.
Oh.
And okay, let's do it. And I pushed for about 45 minutes. And I got to the point I was like, all right, this one's it. Like we're going all in. And so we finally got his head out and they were like, do you want to or they asked if I wanted to fill him crown. And I was like, yeah. I wanted all in. I
can't believe you had the mentality to even
I was like,
that.
Yes, I want to fill him crown, all of that. He crowned. I had another contraction and I just reached down and was like, that's my baby.
That's awesome.
And my doctor was like, you do not get a discount for that. He was a very sweet, awesome doctor. But yeah, they were just like, we need to take him back. Like, I was just like, nope, he's mine. Like, all mine. Like, I'm keeping him. And they're like, we got to cut the cord. We got to clean him up. And I did it. That's kind of the part that I was like, wait, no, you can't take him now. Like, he's,
you
like,
did all the work.
No. Like, you don't need to do anything to him. He's fine. Like, just let me hold him.
And he was crying and all that.
Yes. Right? Yes. So he was born 37 weeks, 2 days. And the nurse was like, are you sure about your due dates? I was doing fertility treatment. I'm very sure about my dates. So he was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, born at 37 weeks, 2 days. So thankfully,
like the ideal pregnancy.
Yeah, so thankfully he came a little early, because if not, he would have been a monster.
Yeah. Like an 8.5, 9.5 pound baby.
Yeah. So that was the easy part. And then we had, we had awful experience trying to breastfeed. It was the hardest thing I've ever tried to do in my life.
It is hard.
And, he was a very sleepy baby. We could never get him to wake up fully to take a feed. We'd strip him down, put a cold washcloth on him. By the time we left the hospital, my nipples were already bleeding and cracked. And then at the hospital, and the nurses are so sweet, but they were very forceful in their techniques and trying
to get
a latch. So then I had my first panic attack before I left the hospital with him.
Had you ever had panic
I
attack?
have.
You have? Okay.
So yeah, I have a history of depression and anxiety. And I knew that I was at a risk. But I also knew I had friends that had postpartum depression. I know what to look for. Like, I know how I feel when I'm anxious. Like, it's not a big deal. I just go to the doctor. I go see my therapist. I get on my medicine, and everything will work itself out. Everything did not work itself out.
Yeah. So you hadn't been on anything at that point. Your pregnancy, you had been fine.
I had, when we had discussed that we were ready to start trying, I had weaned off all of my medication because, I even counted how many Tylenol I took when I was pregnant. I was super, wanted to do everything I could to make sure that he was healthy and I was healthy, and that everything was just perfect and right. And, so I just thought that our breastfeeding adventure was going to be great and he was going to come out and latch. And I had taken the breastfeeding classes. A friend who was a lactation consultant, come to the house. She was one of the first people to see him at the hospital. We couldn't get the hang of it. And it, I kind of went in a downward spiral of, when he was sleeping, I would stay up Googling how to make him latch, how to get him to eat, how to, just, why do I feel like this? Like, what's going on? And then it turned into, I hadn't slept in 6 days and I wasn't eating. And I kept on having panic attacks. They were always worse at night.
And this is immediately once you got home, you just didn't sleep.
That started happening immediately when I got home. I couldn't. We still just tried to get him to latch. Doctor appointments after doctor's appointments of going to different lactation consultants, trying nipple shields, weighted feeds, and I could get the feeds down while they were there with me. We could do it, but as soon as we came home, it was like everything fell apart and we couldn't do it. And I was just finally just got to the point of, we have to do formula. I went to my doctor and I told her, I was like, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I'm just a mess with anxiety. And she's like, I think you need to just maybe give him some bottles and, you yourself get some sleep because you're not sleeping and it's not helping. You need to rest a little. So finally I felt like I had permission to give him some formula in a bottle. And then I still wasn't sleeping. I was up with guilt because I'm formula feeding my baby what, had been ingrained in my mind as poison.
Right.
You're a terrible mom. You're feeding your child poison. And so, I just felt terrible. And then I still wasn't sleeping and I started refusing to get up with my son. He would be crying and hungry, and my husband would be like, "You've got to get up and feed him." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to." I was like, I can't. And I just kept telling him, I can't. I'd lay in the floor and scream and cry and shake and tell him, I can't do this. And at that point, he didn't know what was going on. And I kept telling him, I was like, something's wrong. Like, I've got to get help. Something's wrong. And it took me a really, really long time, what felt like a long time, to tell him what was going on. And it turns out I was having intrusive thoughts of putting bleach in our son's baby bottles.
So your brain was like, you need to do this. Like, this is like telling you almost like a hallucination kind of thing.
It wasn't exactly a hallucination. Like, have you ever just had like a random thought, like, and like if you're in a situation like, oh, like this bank would be like really easy to rob or something, if you're like in a situation, it was a thought like that, but it got so caught up in my mind and I was so terrified of this thought. I was so terrified that the son that we did fertility treatment for, that how could I possibly think that, knowing how much our son is wanted? And I got to the point, I thought I was possessed. I was convinced I was possessed by the devil and needed an exorcism, because there's no one in their right mind that no one would ever, ever, ever have a thought like that. And so I refused to be around my son. I was terrified to be around my son. I was terrified to be alone with myself. I felt like I was such a terrible, awful person for having these thoughts, and I hadn't slept, I hadn't ate, and I was really starting to question, like, how does a person just snap? We hear about people that just snap all the time, and like, is this what happens? Like, do they just not sleep? Do they not eat? Do they have these little thoughts that just send them just completely over the edge, to the point that I was terrified to be alone. And I was terrified to tell anyone what I was feeling, because I was like, if I tell someone this, they're going to, there's no hope for me. I didn't think there was no hope for me. It's like, you don't come back from this.
How do you fix this?
They either put me in a mental institution for the rest of my life because normal people don't have these thoughts, or I should just pack my crap up and leave my husband and my son and disappear. Or, instead of looking like a coward, if I took my own life, at least people would understand that I was struggling instead of looking like a coward. And those are the thoughts that, like, they terrified me. And I was terrified to be alone. And I was like, I knew with my history, I was like, these aren't normal thoughts, but I couldn't wrap my head around that those are thoughts that come with postpartum depression. I thought postpartum depression was just, you don't brush your teeth, you don't shower, you don't take care of yourself, you're not interested in what you were doing. I didn't realize that there were so many different facets to perinatal mood disorders, that the putting the bleach in the baby bottle was an intrusive thought. It didn't mean that I was going to do it. The response and it was explained to me later on that the response to it was a good response because I realized it was wrong.
Right.
I was right to be scared by it, because if you weren't scared by it, then that means that there probably is something a little more sinister at play. But fortunately, I finally, my sister, my whole family came in. Everyone was called in, and, Amy's having a really hard time. We need to be there to support her. And my sister came, and we were outside, and fortunately with her background, she knows a lot about mental health issues, and she took me outside and just straight up asked me, and she was the first person that I told. She said, "Are you having thoughts of hurting Finley?" And it was like, it's not thoughts that I want to have. I was like, I'm having thoughts, but they're not my thoughts. It's not what I want to think. And she was like, that's a symptom of postpartum depression. We need to get you help. So from there, the decision was made that I would go to UNC Chapel Hill. They have a center for women's mood disorders. It's one of the only in the country. And it's a 5-bed inpatient unit, and they treat women for perinatal depression and all sorts of different mood disorders, postpartum psychosis, OCD, postpartum anxiety, depression, you name it, they can handle it, and they're amazing.
That's awesome. I've never heard of like
what
a specified unit like
that. It
that.
is highly specified, and people come from all over the country. So we're really fortunate that it's right here. I spent 2 weeks in there. And it's really cool. I know pre-COVID, my son was able to come and see me every single day. My husband, my son, my family could come see me every single day. You have access to breast pumps if you want to pump and send the milk home with your child. If your child does come and see you, you're not separated from them. You're not like in a cell. You
Right.
can breastfeed them. We were actually part of an attachment study while I was there, where my husband and my son came in and they recorded interactions with me and my son. And looking at those played back to me was a huge turning point, because I was so scared to interact with him because of these feelings that we didn't bond immediately. You always hear oh, my son's my whole world. Like, I couldn't resonate with that in the beginning. It was,
I think you really did love him, but you were, like you said, you're scared. So like you had an attachment to him, but you were just too scared.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and I think that's part of the perfectionist, because it wasn't my perfect idea, and everything wasn't working out. It wasn't that I couldn't love him. It was just not what I expected. I didn't expect to have these issues or these thoughts or these feelings. And I was so scared of hurting him that it was hard to form that attachment, because, really assess those feelings, because I had so many other negative feelings going on at the time.
Yeah.
But to watch the interactions played back to me, I was like, that woman looks like a good mom. Like, that woman looks like she's really doing good. And it was just eye-opening, because that woman was me. And
were they playing them for you while you were there? Or
yeah.
was this like way after?
Oh, no, it was while I was
okay.
there. So it was part of the study. And, so we did talks with the psychiatrist and the whole team. I mean, there's a giant team of fabulous people that work with you, and there's social workers involved. And before you're even discharged, you have to, fill out your care plan of how you're going to care for yourself. You've got to choose your therapist and have therapy set up outside of the unit. And it's just absolutely life-changing. And just going in there and I remember going in there and then like, it's not postpartum depression. Like, I'm possessed. Like, you guys can say that. And they're like, just trust the process. And the more, I went through it and they explained to me what postpartum depression was. And a nurse, my first night in there, handed me a book. It's called Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts. And one of the pages in there, like, it was if they weren't having the same thought, but it was a thought of hurting their child. And I was like, wait, like seeing it in writing and like published that other people have these scary, intrusive thoughts. I was like, maybe there is something to this, postpartum depression, postpartum OCD that they're talking about. Like, maybe they're right. And it was a huge learning experience and life-changing experience for me. I literally owe my life to them and my family. And I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for such a specialized team.
Right.
And it's sad because it's not something that everyone has access to. It's even people in North Carolina don't have the best access to it, but in other states, it's not common for such a specialized care unit to be found. So
yeah, I work in labor and delivery, and I've never heard of a place like that. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it's very, very cool, and it's protected sleep. So you're there, you're sleeping, you're up in the morning though, you're doing your therapy, you're doing your yoga, you're doing your group sessions. And really, I mean, I've met like probably she's a really, really good friend. And our kids are close in age and
He was struggling too.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it's just we've been able to bounce information off of each other and like how we're continuing our care and how we're feeling. And it's just nice to be able to talk to someone. And for me, it's not a blessing that, I mean, I guess it could be a blessing that it happened to me, but I'm very, very outspoken about mental health issues, which obviously I'm here.
Yeah.
And so in a way, if it was going to happen to someone, I wasn't one that was going to shy away and not talk about it. And so I know some people are probably like, oh my gosh, that's the postpartum girl, like always talking about it. But I really feel like education is so important on these issues. Like, I was so scared telling people in the beginning that the scary thought that I was having, the bleach in the baby bottle, like the first time I said that out loud, like it ripped me. And I remember the first time I told a friend and their mouth just kind of fell open. And it's always a concern of, especially right after the fact. And I was telling people, it's like, don't call CPS on me. Like, I promise, like, I'm not a threat, but I want people to know, because if it can happen to me, I mean, it can happen to anyone.
Right.
They say that, a lot of people associate postpartum depression with traumatic births, but I mean, my birth was far from traumatic. I mean, it was ideal. I mean, it was quick and
Beyond
not
easy.
easy. I mean, easy in the sense of giving birth, but
Right, right.
I mean, it was an uncomplicated, natural, or non-epidural vaginal delivery. It was everything I wanted. And so I think there's a lot more to it than just having a traumatic birth.
And I think just having a history with depression automatically puts you at like a much higher risk than anybody without that history.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think I was a little bit thrown off from having a history of anxiety and depression. I was like, oh, well, I know when I'm anxious because I get, because with my history, once again, they asked me before I was discharged, how are you going to know if something's off? And I'm like, oh, if I'm anxious, I'll just be cleaning a lot, which did happen a lot. Oh my gosh, that's what I did when I didn't sleep. I scrubbed baby bottle. I scrubbed everything. Oh my gosh, I just cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned. That's postpartum OCD.
Yeah. I remember doing that in the hotel, not the hotel room, the hospital room, like, because I have anxiety and stuff. I mean, suffer like you did, but I remember just like going around the room and just like always tidying things up. I'm like, I don't even do this in my own house. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. So, I mean, just casually telling the doctor, like, oh yeah, I'll just like be cleaning a lot. And that, if it's my depression, like I'll just, I'll be sad. I won't feel like eating. I won't do, oh no, it was 1,000 times worse than I could have ever imagined. I mean, give me labor and delivery all day. The mental toll was just horrendous.
And it seemed like it happened so fast.
It did. I mean, it was so fast. I know typically most people will be like, oh, it's just the baby blues. It's just the baby blues. I was diagnosed and in the hospital before my son was 2 weeks old. Well, right around 2 weeks old. He may have been a few days over 2 weeks old. But I knew, that is one thing I knew with my history and how bad things can get out of hand when you have anxiety and depression. I knew getting treatment quickly was the best remedy for me. There are outpatient opportunities. Obviously, with me having thoughts the way I was having, it was a little more scary, that especially with me, I couldn't necessarily, because of the frame of mind I was in, the questionnaire, are you thinking of hurting yourself or someone else? It's, well, I'm having thoughts that would hurt someone else. It's how do you exactly answer that question? And it was like, if I'm being honest on how scared I was, then yes, like, I didn't think it was healthy for me to be at home with them. Like, I needed to get better for me so I could eventually be home. And so that's, I was inpatient, and it didn't take the, full, just get through the baby blues. It was full steam ahead. That was, the night I left the hospital, I knew it was bad. I called my mom and was like, Mom, you have to come back. Like,
she lives Western.
Yes, she lives 3 hours away, and she turned around and came back.
That's awesome. You have that support.
Yeah, so that was great. I had a lot of support from pretty much everyone in the family. And when I came home from the hospital, while I was in the hospital, oh my gosh, like my husband, bless his heart, he had my mom there, he had my dad and my stepmom there, and people are doing laundry and taking care of the baby, and I know he appreciated it all, but I think he was just kind of like, all right, guys, like, I just need a little bit of time. Right. And then when I came home, then my mother-in-law stayed at our house for a week, and, she would do like a late feed with the baby so that we could all sleep. And, it was just a kind of reintroducing me, because my husband was back at work. He was home with me for 2 weeks after I came home. 1 or 2 weeks.
From being inpatient.
From being inpatient. Mm-hmm. And then my mother-in-law stayed with me for a week while he was back at work. And then my mom came after that. And finally, at that point, I was like, all right, Mom, like, I think she had been there at 3 days, and I was getting my spunk back. And I was like, all right, like, I think I've, you've got to let me fly now. Let me have my baby boy on my own. Like, I got this now. Like, let's go.
You're ready to be the mom you want.
Yeah, like, I'm ready to be super mom now. Like, let's go. So it was really cool. And I still go to therapy with my therapist that I started with at the beginning of it. And one of our first sessions, she had me, we were just sitting there talking and modeling clay, and she would, I don't even remember the prompt of it. I guess it was about how you want your relationship with your son to be. And so I modeled, I made one heart, and then I made a smaller heart and put it like on top of the big heart. And I was like, I want him to feel like he's my whole world. Like I want, I want like this really strong connection. And she was like, like you guys will get there, just one day at a time. You're getting to know each other. Just because he was inside of you, you're still getting to know him. It may not happen right away, and that's okay. And that was a relief to hear. And throughout the months and weeks up until COVID, he would come to my appointments with me. And so she got to see like our relationship grow and bond. And I was actually at therapy before I came over here to record this. And we were talking about being at the playground today. And I was like, there are these kids there, and I know he's little, but they wouldn't let him go on the slide. And this little boy was saying, shoo, shoo, shoo to my son. And I just wanted to be like, excuse me. So they're like, see how far you came? It was like, no one's going to hurt my baby.
Beat this kid up for the slide.
Yeah. I was like, no one's going to hurt my baby. And it's like, oh my gosh, like how far I've come from feeling like I need this attachment to been like, gorilla mom on the playground, like, it's my son's turn. He can go down that slide if he wants to. I know he's not even 2 yet, but let him slide.
That's how like when we would actually have kids over, and I'm like, I'd be like, hide all your good toys. Like, we don't want them messing with your good toys.
I know, like I felt so offended today when they like wouldn't let him slide. I was like, no, like nobody's mean to mama's baby.
Oh, that's so sad.
So yeah, it's been a wild, going on 18 months.
So you feel like you were kind of like coming around the bend by like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, just about?
Absolutely.
Like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, by the end of what would have been my maternity leave, I was in a completely different headspace. I still, up until he was off of it, struggled with feeding my son formula.
Yeah.
It just, and I remember when I would first take him out in public, I was so ashamed and so embarrassed to feed him a bottle in public that I would like mix it in my car and then put it in the diaper bag so no one could see me do it, and then feed him when I was out, just because I was convinced that someone would tell me what a terrible, horrible mother I was for feeding him chemicals.
Or make a comment like, oh, you didn't try breastfeeding?
Yeah.
Like,
and I'm
really?
just like, no, yeah, we tried. But I think that was the one thing that really kind of carried over. But it was like, once I had permission of what the intrusive thoughts were, and that they were thoughts and it didn't mean that I was going to act on them, and that they were really just my body's stress response. Since the initial ones I was having, I've had maybe 2. And I mean, they're a different intrusive thought. Like I had one, I've got this thing about knives that I don't like them. Like if you lay a knife down on the kitchen counter and for some reason it lands like blade side up, they've got a thing that they
Like
can't,
OCD.
yeah, like they can't be like that, because I had an intrusive thought that someone would fall on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really, other than that, I mean, I'm still on medication. But I think medication was something that I wouldn't have known if I wouldn't have went off of it for my first pregnancy. But I know I've had depression and anxiety since I was 15.
So you think that if you had been on it while you were pregnant and postpartum, that you wouldn't have had an issue? Is that what you're saying?
I think it wouldn't have been as bad. I still think I would have had issues, but I don't think it would have been as severe.
Right.
So, but I also think knowing what postpartum depression is and everything that it can entail is helpful too. It's not as scary when you can put a label on it.
Yeah, and your husband
know what it
be able to
is.
see it soon, too, like quicker probably.
Yeah, and now that he knows what it is, instead of, I remember one night, when I told first time I refused to feed our son, and he was just like, "You are not quitting on this family. You cannot do this." Like, he had every right to be angry at me. We just had a kid, and I'm like, "No, I can't do this. Sorry." Like, but at that point, he didn't understand what was going on. Once he realized, and once I told him, the thoughts that I was having, it's a little easier for him to, it was honestly, it's kind of more like, yeah, you need some help because I don't want you around our kid either.
Yeah.
That's a typical response and totally valid.
Right. So you told me that you're 7 weeks pregnant now. Are you going to stay on medications throughout your pregnancy, or will you try to wean and then restart them after you have the baby? Or
so I haven't met with my doctor that I'm using for this pregnancy yet. We do that tomorrow. I have met with my prescribing women's health nurse practitioner who is a member of the Postpartum Support International. And we have talked, and she thinks, and we both think it is in my best interest to stay on medication throughout my pregnancy.
Okay.
But we will be working with my doctor to determine if that's the best case, and how my body's responding and how I'm feeling. But there's also just a lot of research on how cortisol, throughout your pregnancy can affect the baby as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people, it really is just the best option.
Right. So when you
to
get stressed out, you release
medication,
cortisol, and then it stresses the baby out.
Yeah. So yeah. So hopefully this go round, we're working on plans. We didn't have any fertility issues this time. And so we've been talking to, my team of doctors about how we wanted to kind of proceed with, potentially getting pregnant again. We just had started that process, talking to them of if I wanted to continue on medication throughout a pregnancy, and if we thought that was the best route, and kind of just creating a plan of what hospital did I want to deliver at. Just there's certain things, like I can't use Love's diapers because that's what we used with my son when we first came home, and the smell just kind of brings back a lot of memories from the early time, and I don't want to do that. So, there was thoughts on, do I want to deliver at Rex again? Do I want to use the same practice again? And, COVID kind of made those decisions for me. We went with a different practice because they allow a partner to be with you at all of your appointments. So we thought that was very important. My husband's a super involved dad, and really, he was there for pretty much every appointment at my last, our last pregnancy. And so it was really important to both of us that he's able to be there this time. So we found a practice that we're feeling pretty confident in, and we'll know more tomorrow. But he's right now able to go to all of the visits, and they deliver at Rex. And I had a great experience with most people at Rex, especially Rashawn, the labor and delivery nurse. She was awesome. She took pictures for us, and she laughed at me because she's like, what kind of crazy person is taking pictures when they're 10 centimeters? Just like, I want to remember it.
And not have epidural. That just blows my mind. Like, usually when people hit 10 centimeters, they're like losing their mind. They have no idea what's going on. And then the baby comes out, they're like, oh, okay. So yeah.
The nitrous oxide.
I had that with one of mine, and I literally picked that hospital. I had switched providers because I wanted to go to a hospital that had that, and it was useless. I used it for about 10 minutes. I was like, forget this. I'm done.
So they told me it's all about how you breathe when you're using it.
Oh.
And so we were curious because my husband and I both scuba dive. And so we're used to breathing out of like a regulator when we're diving. And so when we were talking about that, we were curious if maybe, that had something to do with it, because you don't breathe or they told me not to really breathe like I was breathing normally, like to do more. I don't even remember
deep
at this
breathing,
point. It was more like, yeah, kind of like a really strong breath.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
You felt like a little woozy when
yeah.
Oh.
It was, my husband's like, you were definitely more relaxed after the nitrous oxide.
Well, if I ever have another one, I'll keep that in mind. I said, this thing is broken. It's not working.
Now, did they have the mask over your face for you, or did you have like the tube?
I think it was the tube.
Mine was the tube.
Oh, okay. I mean, it was 2 years ago, but I think it must have been like almost like you're doing like a neb treatment or something. Yeah. Well, that's like really good that you kind of are like being very proactive and like thinking ahead of all the stuff that to make it like an ideal experience and not like triggering. And
yeah, we're doing everything we can and praying that, it's not something we have to deal with this time. If it is, we will be better prepared this time.
Yeah.
If you've had postpartum depression once, you're more susceptible to having it again. Mm-hmm. So that's always scary. And also, just you don't get a lot of sleep when a baby comes, and knowing, how vital sleep is to mental health is scary. But, teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah, maybe we'll win the lottery and hire a postpartum doula.
Like a night nurse or something.
Absolutely.
Do you think that you'll try breastfeeding again, or you just
absolutely?
You are.
Yes, I want to try again. I'm definitely planning to be a lot more relaxed and not so hard on myself if we've got to do some supplementation with formula, just to give mom a break. Or if I just had this idea that he's going to latch and it's not going to be an issue. I didn't have my pump out. I hadn't cleaned anything from my pump or anything like that. And then, when everything just went down the crapper, I was like, I don't even know where to begin on pumping. Like, I've got to sterilize all this, and Lord knows with OCD, nothing's ever going to get clean enough. That was another huge issue, like cleaning all of the parts and all of that, which just seemed so incredibly overwhelming to me that I couldn't wrap my head around it.
It is even when you're not dealing with that.
I was just like, I don't even know where to begin. It was like, but yeah, we're gonna try again.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like as simple as like a tongue tie or a lip tie. And when those go undiagnosed, sometimes like it can make it like super, super traumatic. Like just tearing apart your nipples and not getting enough. I mean, I'm sure you've been through.
Yeah. I mean, he did actually end up having an undiagnosed lip tie and possibly tongue tie that just.
So yeah, right. I mean, it wasn't your fault, like nothing. And that like I always feel like when I'm trying to help someone breastfeed at work, like the more anxious people get and the more like frustrated, it makes it so much harder for the baby to latch. Like I don't know if you're blocking off milk from coming out or if the baby just feels your energy, and it's not a good combination.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely like, I would just like hold him and shake. Like I would like get so anxious before I even started to try. And I would just dread waking up for that next feeding. Just dread it.
Yeah.
But you know what? He's going on 18 months and 26 pounds, and
he's surviving.
Yeah, he's surviving. Jumping off of everything like little Batman. Yeah. With a little Rambo running through the house. So he'll be all right.
Sounds like my 2-year-old, my little football player who's 40 pounds. Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'd probably do good at the park together.
Yeah. End of the day, they're all just going to prefer chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese. So.
That is true. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was an incredible story.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I will one last thing. If anyone is struggling, I'd like to give a little.
Oh, yeah.
Postpartum Support International is a huge resource. You can find providers close and local to you. UNC Perinatal Mood Disorder Clinic for Women in Chapel Hill. And then there is also a mom support group. It's Mom Supporting Moms that meets at Rex on Mondays, or they did pre-COVID.
So you're not sure if they're doing that anymore?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are awesome.
I'm sure that's all available through UNC.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I'll put it like when I'll post it on Facebook and Instagram and all that.
All right. Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this incredible mom story today. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it may have helped you in some way. Make sure you rate and leave a comment so I can be sure to bring you the content that you really want. Please follow the Incredible Moms podcast on Instagram, where you'll also be able to find many updates and episodes. I can't tell you how much I appreciate any support. Stay tuned for another Incredible Mom next week.